Hello everybody, it's Josie here. I am doing my part 2 wrap up for April. So I read quite a few books in April, not as many actually that I read in March, but I had a few kind of really big chunky books at the beginning of the month. So like The Passage, that was really big. The Circle was quite a long book. So I didn't get through quite as many as I thought I would, but I got through some really good ones. So this is kind of the part 2 of the wrap up. I did do a few kind of individual just reviews this month. So the first two I've actually got here is The Devouring Grey by Christine Lynn Herman, and then we've got The Burning by Laura Bates. And both of these books, I'm not going to go into much detail because I actually did some individual reviews. If you want to know about these two, please go to the individual reviews. But what I would say is I loved The Burning by Laura Bates. It is so clever. It is about, it interweaves two stories. So a modern story of a girl who has had to leave her school. She's had to relocate to another city because of something that happened at her school that she was shamed for. And the other story in here is about a witch back during the time of the witch trials. And the title of The Burning actually kind of relates to how we vilify women, both in the past and in the present. So I love this book. This is a 5-star read for me. I adored it. And then The Devouring Grey. This was described to me as kind of a Stranger Things meets Riverdale type of book, and it's about this town that is plagued kind of by a bit of a monster, and you've got these families, these 4 founding families of the town, and they're kind of tasked with protecting the town. So it's a YA kind of thriller, magical aspects to it. I liked it. I didn't love it. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue in the series, so I gave this 3 stars because on average it was entertaining, but I'm not entirely sure if I would continue with this one. Then, moving on, I have got this one, The Gilda Stories. Now, oh my god, this is by Joelle Gomez, and The Gilda Stories is a book that I've been meaning to read for a very long time, and I finally got my hands on it, and I needed to read it this month. So, it is a lesbian vampire novel, where you've also got women of colour. It is so beautifully written. I love, you know, vampire books anywhere, and I love Anne Rice and I love Poppy Z. Brite, but this one just also having that kind of sapphic lesbian element to it, and having these beautiful main characters that were actually the story is quite lyrical and beautiful, and it is about kind of the friendship as well and the relationship between these women, and it kind of goes through the centuries. I think it ends in like 2025. It kind of ends in the future, but it is so beautifully written, and at its heart it's about these relationships and about living this stretch of time and about seeing people come in and out of your life and kind of holding on to those that you really love and are really important. And it isn't what I love about this is it isn't that kind of blood, guts and gore vampire story. So if you're looking for that, it isn't. Obviously there is vampirism in the book. It is real vampirism, so it's not like some other books where it's kind of hinted at or it's a weird sort of deviation of it. These are vampires, but it's just so gorgeous. And this is going on my list of one of my favourite books of the year, probably one of my favourite books of all time, and it'll definitely be reread. Then the next one I've got here is Veronica by Mary Gaitskill. Am I saying that right? Gaitskill. So this, weirdly, this was another one that I was really looking forward to. It's been on my TBR shelf forever. And this was kind of sold to me as a story of 2 women about their friendship, about their crazy life in the 1980s, about sort of the modelling world. And it is all about that. But I also thought that the way it'd been kind of sold in a lot of the synopses I'd read were kind of, again, that these women form a relationship that's more than a friendship. And if I'm totally honest, there might be a tiny hint of that somewhere, but it isn't really. It's quite a sad story. So, you know, you've got the 1980s and AIDS and you know, so in that kind of quite debauched 1980s drug taking modelling kind of scene as well, and I did like it. I just didn't love it, and it's a shame because I know it was shortlisted for the National Book Award. It is a real classic. I've really been looking forward to reading it, and it's not going to be a book that I'll pick up again. So The writing is very good. I'd give it more than 3 stars. I'd probably give it 3.5 stars, but I just, maybe I built it up too much in my head, but yeah, it just wasn't the amazing story that I thought it was going to be. There are some really poignant, touching moments in it. There is this element of good friendship, toxic friendship, how we treat each other, we treat ourselves, which is interesting, but yeah, I was missing something, and I don't really know what. Then the next one, so this is another book. So Cottonmouth Kisses by Clint Catalyst. Now, I have had this on my kind of radar as a book ever since I was a teenager, or sort of, yeah, late teens, I think. And I was very much goth. I went through a very much gothic phase. I think I still am in some ways. And this book was always kind of one of these holy grail books of sort of goth, like 90s goth club short story fiction. But I could never get my hands on a copy for some reason. It was really hard to get my hands on this, and I actually managed to find this on Marketplace on Amazon. And what it is, it's really interesting. So I thought it was just short stories, but it's not just short stories. It actually has a lot of poetry in between, which I really loved. And I think it's hit or miss with poetry, but I really love this. So you can see you've got like a really short story, and then you've got a poem over there. And the whole book is kind of short stories and poetry, and it is very gritty. It's very goth. There is a lot of queer kind of romance, particularly boy-on-boy romance in this one. Trigger warnings, there's drug taking, there's alcoholism, there's quite graphic depictions of sex as well in here. So it's not necessarily for a younger audience. But I really enjoyed it. It has real shades of Poppy Z. Brite. I love Poppy Z. Brite, and I actually read another short story collection this month, which is a Poppy Z. Brite short story collection, and I would say there's echoes of that there. And what I also loved, and I don't know if I said this in my when I was talking about the books I was going to read, but this is signed. Clint Catalyst actually signed this, which is pretty cool. I didn't realise that. So yeah, I really loved it. I loved the poetry in it. I loved the short stories. I loved the grit. I loved the fact that it made me slightly uncomfortable in some of the stories, and it's definitely one that I will pick up again and reread, particularly the poetry sections of it. Then while we were talking about it, it's this one over here. So it's Self-Made Man by Poppy Z. Brite. I've probably said this countless times, Poppy Z. Brite, one of my all-time favourite authors. And this, she's very much a 90s cult author in terms of vampire fictions, Lost Souls being the most famous book, but she writes some really cool, I've read a couple of other of her short story collections, but I hadn't read this one, so I was quite excited about that. So it's a collection of her short stories, but also she writes with other people. And I mean, you've got all sorts of topics. So Poppy Z. Brite is essentially a horror writer, or was essentially a horror writer. And you have some, so again, these stories are not for the faint-hearted. There's a story in here that features cannibalism. There's a lot of murder and guts and gore in these. But I love the way she writes, and I love the grit, and I love the fact that it completely challenges me when I read these stories. So I really loved it. Oh, I didn't give a star. So Cottonmouth Kisses, 4.5 stars. This 4.5 stars, both probably bordering on 5 stars for me. But yeah, it's not always easy to read these stories, but they're beautifully written, and they do make you confront things, which I like. Then the next one I've got here. So, okay, deep breath. The Portrait of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I love the film. I've seen actually a couple of versions of the film, and I've always loved Dorian Gray, and I love the idea of Dorian Gray. So I found this copy. I've never actually read the book. Gorgeous cover. Loved kind of the cover of this, and I was really hyped to read it. And I found the audiobook on my library selection. I thought, oh, I'll listen to it while I walk to work. And I was so bored. Maybe I need to give the book a go, but goodness, I just, yeah, I was bored. The basic premise of the story is good, but I don't know if it was the narration or there is some long-winded descriptions in here of things like jewels and the acquiring of fine things and jewels that just seem to go on and on and on. And these passages, they just weren't interesting. I feel like they took the most interesting elements of the story and put it in the films. And I know a lot of people are going to just hate me for saying that and say it's sacrilege. And Oscar Wilde does write well. I've read other Oscar Wilde short stories and that, but it just, I mean, I was bored. I was so bored. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. Then, such a letdown. Then we have Animals by Emma Jane Unsworth. So this one was a bit of a fun read. It is basically about this friendship between two women. So no, let me rephrase that. I thought it was going to be kind of a fun read. So you've got these two women, and they are typical kind of British women in their late 20s. They love going out, they love getting really drunk, they love partying, but they do it to real excess. Like, they go out, they drink, they can't remember what happened, sort of wake up next day. And one of these women is kind of continuing in this lifestyle, and the other one has gotten engaged, and she's about to be married, and her fiance actually is kind of, he's given up drinking, and he does sort of get on her a little bit about her drinking, but her friend kind of peer pressure, her friend kind of drags her along, and they have a great time, and there's a lot of kind of them going out and getting drunk and doing reckless things. And that's really the main premise of the book. But I think kind of underneath that is, again, the idea of friendship and toxic friendship. You know, when you think people are good for you and they may not be. You know, how your relationships look, how they construct themselves. I think that's really interesting, that relationship between two women. I love those kind of quite complicated relationships. There's a hint that there might be some mutual attraction as well, but that's not explicit, so the book's not about that. But it's more about this kind of quite toxic, in places, friendship, and I guess also finding yourself in the sense that, do you continue on that path, or do you know, when do you mature, when do you grow up, when do you say enough's enough, all of those themes. So I actually really enjoyed this book. So again, this is 3.5 stars for me. I like this one. Final two. So let me do this one first. So I've got this one. It's called A Different Kind of Evil, and this is basically sort of a fiction. So it's writing about Agatha Christie, but having Agatha Christie as a character in the book. I didn't realise this is actually, I think, the second one in the series, but I don't think it really matters. You kind of, they talk about it a little bit in the beginning, but then the story sort of sits on its own. So what it is that Agatha Christie has taken her daughter and kind of a secretary, and she's sailing on a boat to the Canary Islands. And while she's on the boat, she sees a woman jump off the end of the boat and commit suicide. And then you've kind of got a cast of characters once they reach the Canary Islands. And the reason Agatha Christie is on this boat to go to the Canary Islands is she's been kind of recruited by like MI5 to find, so there was another agent on the Canary Islands, and he was found dead in a cave under quite mysterious circumstances. So his body was found in a cave, but his body was completely drained of blood. So she's kind of going there to figure out what happened to him. And that's kind of where, I'm not going to say any more because obviously it's a thriller mystery, and if I say any more, it's going to wreck the storyline. But I really enjoyed it. It was fun. Is it the best thriller mystery I've ever read? No. It's actually very much in the style of like old school Agatha Christie, kind of a whodunit, cast of characters. You suspect this one, actually no, you know, it's someone else, that kind of thing. So for kind of a fun, I mean, I read this in a few hours, just kind of a fun Sunday read, take your mind off other things, lose yourself in a bit of a mystery. I really enjoyed it. 3 stars for that. But it's not, will I read more of these? No. And then the last one I read was this one over here, Killing Eve, codename Villanelle. And again, I didn't realise, I thought this was a standalone. I didn't realise that there are more books because, warning, yeah, it does just end. So you know, it sort of ends and you're like, okay, there's gonna be a sequel. But I didn't realise there was. So this is about a Russian spy. Her name's Villanelle. And then Eve is a English, like an MI5 agent as well, had a bit of a theme going on there. And she is kind of tasked with tracking Villanelle down. So you get dual perspective in this book. You get from Villanelle's perspective of what she's doing and what's going on, and she's a Russian assassin, so she's going around killing people. And then you have Eve and kind of her life and her working to try and find out who this assassin is. And let me be honest, the Eve bits I didn't like, I just wasn't that interested in. Villanelle as a character, I loved. I have a thing for female assassins. It's bad. I think The Long Kiss Goodnight, I watched that, and yeah, I just loved the character in that. But Villanelle is incredibly interesting. She's also, again, this is not for the faint-hearted. There's a lot of sex in it. She likes boys, she likes girls. I think she likes girls a bit more. And she is very ruthless, kind of doesn't seem to have any conscience about what she does, but I found her very fascinating, and I could have read the whole book just from Villanelle's perspective. I think the kind of hunt to find her and the Eve perspective, certainly in this book, I'm assuming it get more developed in the others. There just wasn't that much going on there. This for me really focuses on Villanelle and her as a character and her kind of, yeah, her kind of hard-heartedness, and I like that. So this was probably, if it had just been Villanelle, it would have been like 3.5, bordering on 4 stars, but just for the fact that there wasn't really much of a chase plot at all, it was just Villanelle doing her thing and Eve doing her thing, I only ended up giving this 3 stars, but Villanelle as a character, I like. So anyway, that was it. That's my wrap up. Thank you for listening to me. I will be back soon with another video, and have a good day. Bye bye.